In today's show, a crossover edition of the episode where Jackson Gatlin from Locked On Rockets joins the program and we talk all things Malcolm Brogdon to Houston. Could it happen? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and host of Locked On Trailblazers, Mike Richmond. I am joined in a crossover edition of this very episode by Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets. So you're also listening to Locked On Rockets too. Jackson, how you doing?
I am doing fantastic, Mike. I'm excited to be here. We did one of these crossovers at one point in time in the past, centered around a guy hopefully many people are less familiar with now, Christian Wood, of all things. And so I'm excited to talk about this crossover. The NBA draft right around the corner. And honestly, it's really kind of crazy because we really don't know what any team is going to do in this year's draft. The fact that it's kind of a weaker draft and the fact that there's not like a consensus top 3 guys in this year's draft, it could go any number of different directions. And the Rockets hold the 3rd overall pick. The Blazers hold the 7th overall pick. And that's what we're here to discuss today.
Yeah, so you behind the curtain, this is how negotiations go down in the fake NBA GM world. Jackson sent me a text message, said, would you trade for Malcolm Brogdon? And I was like, or would you consider trading Malcolm Brogdon to the Rockets? And I said, yes, but I only negotiate on the pod. So we're going to talk about a Malcolm Brogdon trade to Houston and what it might look like. But first, let's kind of set the scene for both teams. The Rockets were the best team to miss the playoffs. Is that true? Best team to miss the play-in, I think is probably where they were. A team with young upside, some promising veterans, but not quite there. They're like one of those teams that needs to take a step forward, which is obviously why you need Malcolm Brogdon. Where are they, and sort of why would a trade like this, or what are they going to do this summer to kind of take that next step?
Yeah, so I think the Rockets are in a very similar position to kind of where the OKC Thunder were exactly a year ago when they were 40-42. They made it to the play-in tournament. They ultimately didn't make the playoffs. And then this year they were poised to take yet another substantial leap. And we saw them, become the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, all that. The Rockets feel like they're kind of in that same boat. They were 41-41, barely missed the NBA play-in tournament, at the tail end of the Western Conference. The first time that you've had 11 teams with 41 plus wins in the Western Conference, a historically great year in the Western Conference. Maybe not so much for the Blazers, but
it worked out for them, I guess. Their goal, they achieved their goals. They weren't really good, but they got what they wanted.
Look, so basically the Rockets are now looking to how do they improve, right? How do they take that next step forward next season? We know that the Utah Jazz are angling for whatever reason. Danny Ainge wants them to be competitive. They're not tearing things down over there. We know that the Grizzlies are going to be better again this next season once they get everybody healthy and Ja Morant back in tow and all that. So how do the Rockets take that next step forward? And I think the important thing for them is looking at areas that they can improve kind of, on the margins a little bit. What improvements can you make to this roster? And adding, I think, a veteran presence like Malcolm Brogdon, a guy who's had experience playing with Ime Udoka before, familiar with his system. A bit long in the tooth, dealing with some injury issues, whatnot. But, setting those things aside, how do you improve this roster, right? Do you want to go commit your MLE, $13 million, whatever, 13 to 15 million on, a veteran free agent who's only going to play every so often as like your 3rd string backup guard? Or could you maybe go get that piece from a team like the Blazers, right? And just trade down in a draft? Is this a trade that could be mutually beneficial for both sides, which was kind of the framework that I originally wanted to suggest to you was, essentially the Rockets have this 3rd overall pick, but again, there's not like this tier of prospects where you're like, oh, we have the 3rd overall pick. We're so happy we got in that cutoff before it falls to the next tier of prospects. It kind of feels like there's Alex Sarr at the very top, and he seems like the consensus number 1 prospect in this draft. And then there's everybody else. And there's it's like a tier.
15 players. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they're all in that very next tier, right? So you could take one of those players at number 2 overall, and people think that's an incredible pick, or people might think you're reaching completely. So that's kind of the uncertainty surrounding this draft.
Good, because that's also my negotiation tactic, is that 3 is no better than 7, so we'll get there later.
Oh, okay.
Also, Malcolm Brogdon is 31 years old. He's not that old, Jackson. I don't know how old
He's
you are,
on the
but
wrong side of 30, Mike.
he's not long in the tooth. His teeth are normal size. Find a new slant.
By NBA standards, he's getting a little long in the tooth.
It's true. And he's had some injury history, and he didn't play a single minute for the Blazers after the All-Star break because he was dealing with an elbow injury, and was the same elbow injury or a similar elbow injury to what had kind of torpedoed his playoff run with the Celtics in his final year in Boston. So like there are some red flags, orange flags. I don't know what the
How much of nursing that injury is just because the Blazers want it to be bad in the first?
Yeah, see, that's the unknowable part, right? Like, I think he was hurt. Like, I think that's real. I think they would have liked to play him a couple games, but if it was like, could he have come back? He missed like 20 at the end of the year. Could he have come back and played a handful? I think so. My gut says absolutely, but it's hard to know. And that's the beauty of a team that doesn't try to win, is that you are totally in the dark about what they're after. I'm not bitter about covering a team that loses on purpose.
I don't miss those days. I don't miss those days, Mike. I escaped the darkness this past season. You will be there soon, my friend.
Yeah, we'll see. But I wonder with sort of the Rockets situation, do they have too many young players to an extent where it's like adding a rookie isn't even appealing? Because like I don't know what you guys call them, the core six or whatever it is. Like it seems there is they're not all going to be on rookie contracts forever, but there seems to be a glut of youngsters on this team that can grow. Is there some hesitancy to add another rookie to the mix, or is it like all NBA teams always want to add rookie scale guys?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of the latter because honestly, with a top-notch coaching staff, right? So much development for these young guys happens behind the scenes. Right. You don't have to get, anything out of the 48 minutes of, actual on-court game time to be able to develop. Hell, we can point to Chet Holmgren, who was behind the scenes for an entire year nursing that foot injury, and then was able to come into, what was effectively his second year with the Thunder, but, his rookie season technically this year, and hit the ground running and looks fantastic, right? How much did that help him being with the organization, studying, being in film sessions, and doing all the work behind the scenes for that whole year? And now he's a much more NBA ready prospect than he probably would have been had he just hit the ground running a year ago without the injury. So I do think that if you have a competent coaching staff that can handle the development behind the scenes, yeah, there shouldn't be any fears from Rockets fans or organizationally about adding another prospect, because I think it kind of almost alleviate some of that pressure that a prospect maybe feels immediately of needing to perform, needing to play 25, 30 plus a night on, a bad team or in a bad situation. Whoever the Rockets draft, if they take somebody with pick number 3, or if they trade down potentially with the Blazers and take somebody at pick number 7, ideally, whoever they draft would be somebody that they can slow play the development on, somebody that they can bring along, at their own pace. And then when the timing is right, insert them into the lineup or make a move elsewhere on the roster and open up some rotation minutes if they feel strongly that this candidate is ready to be inserted into the lineup. And to your point about the way the NBA is trending, right? There's no better value in the NBA landscape than a rookie scale deal, right? You get 4 years of team control. You get the team options at the back half of the contract. So I think that the Rockets, the way that they're headed with contract extensions looming on the horizon for Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and then the following season, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr. After that, down the line, you're going to have to figure out if you want to pay Amin Thompson or Cam Whitmore. These are all good problems to have, right? If they all hit and you're like, oh my God, how do we pay all these guys?
Yeah, right,
you're going to be ecstatic. But yes, having yet another, cheap, ideally, NBA level talent, right? Somebody who doesn't bust, somebody who is, capable of playing rotation minutes on a standard, rookie scale contract would be really beneficial down the line.
I think that makes sense to me, because especially in we haven't really seen it. And I think this time next year, we'll have a better sense of it. But the new climate of the CBA with the punitive measures for teams that are really expensive, the league is sort of trending towards the way to stay good is to pay your players on your team, right? Is to extend players that are already on the roster. So like the key sort of mechanisms for improving a team is to be like Houston, right? Is to have, okay, we've got these like 6 guys and maybe 3 to 4 of them hit. We pay them big money, and then we make moves around the margins. free agency is slowly dying in the NBA. They're slowly murdering it dead. And because of the new rules with the CBA, maybe these big blockbuster, stars push their way to a certain location in a borough in New York, and then back out of that borough in New York, and then back out of that city in near New Jersey, and then eventually out of Los Angeles, because that's the nature of the beast. But maybe that is also dying too, right? Like maybe that's also dying too because of the new punitive measures. So I do think having guys on team control matters. Should we talk about why the Blazers might entertain this idea and kind of where they are? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and move over there because we got to tackle it from both sides here and figure out why this makes sense from a Portland perspective as well.
Let's do it. Join us in that second segment, won't you? But first, let me tell you that today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. Well, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's freaking LinkedIn. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and you might not have the resources or the time to hire, so they're always updating their tools to make the process easier and quicker. And there's already 2.5 million small businesses that are using LinkedIn for hiring. So join the gang. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, still chatting here on Locked On Rockets and Locked On Blazers, a crossover extravaganza. I'm Mike Richmond, host of Locked On Blazers, chatting here with the host of Locked On Rockets, Jackson Gatlin. We talked about why this might appeal to the Rockets. Before I weigh in, from an outsider's perspective, what's the pitch to the Blazers?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like the pitch is pretty simple here. When you're in the stage of the rebuilding process that the Blazers are kind of in, you want to find value wherever you can. And at this point, what is Malcolm Brogdon's value worth in a vacuum, right? On its own. Like, can Malcolm Brogdon, if you found the right team, the right suitor, could you maybe pick up, a late first round draft pick from a contending team that feels like he can be a nice, additional piece to their bench, some depth, whatever, that kind of thing? Is this enough value, right? Is there I think it's a two-pronged question. Could you find better value for Malcolm Brogdon elsewhere? Or is this enough value? Is there a prospect the Blazers have high enough on their board that they're intrigued enough by that they want to guarantee that they can get their hands on that prospect at 3, as opposed to hoping that said prospect falls down to pick 7? Because that's the one benefit. Even though this is a weaker draft, being higher in the draft pecking order, you get your pick of the litter, right? You get your pick of whichever prospect you want the most.
Yeah, less teams make decisions ahead of you. No one is making the decision. No team is making the decision for you. You get to make the decision yourself. I agree. I think I agree in theory, although we can argue about that later. There was some reporting from Hoops Hype from Michael Scotto that this is like one of those duh, but when you get it, you get it. That teams are monitoring Malcolm Brogdon as a potential trade chip. Yeah, duh. Like, he's 31. He's oldest player on the Blazers.
Look, I just want to highlight, they've been monitoring Malcolm Brogdon since he landed in Portland. Okay, this has been a thing, kicking the tires on him. Teams trying to figure out whether he's going to stay or go, or what the Blazers want for him, because he's not going to be in Portland forever.
Right. He's not a long-term piece. Not only do they have 2 young guards in Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson, but they also have the sort of mid-range veteran entering year 7 in the NBA and Anthony Simons. Like, they don't need a 4th 30-minute-a-night guard. And Malcolm Brogdon was pretty freaking good last year. Health was an issue. Availability was an issue. But as an off-ball shooter and an on-ball creator, what he does is he's a bucket. And he was still pretty much a bucket. He's like a competent defender and a competent playmaker. But what he does is you can give him the ball and he can go score. And he particularly is useful as a second unit guy in that role. And then in a pinch, he can be your point guard starter, and he can play both guard spots to some extent. He has some appeal there. I wonder for the Blazers, and I think you're right that it's what is the reporting from Hoops Hype said it's teams are monitoring them. Duh, they've been monitoring him since he arrived last fall. But that the idea would be that the Blazers would get a first round pick. But I think you hit the nail on the head. What first round pick? Like what first round pick? Is the 28th pick in the draft super appealing? To some folks, they'd rather have 31 than 28 because 31 is the second rounder and you get you can bully guys. You don't have to give them guaranteed money. Like it's just a little bit different.
Yay for bullying people who are chasing their hopes and dreams of joining the
Yeah,
NBA.
I love to take advantage of someone by picking them 3 slots later. That's what I root for my team to do. But there's so yeah, I don't think he has a particularly appealing trade market. In fact, there was reporting at the trade deadline this year that the Blazers were maybe uninterested in trading Malcolm Brogdon, but I read that as unable to trade Malcolm Brogdon, so they lost interest because there's no way, at least this is maybe what I hope, there's no way the front office didn't explore trading Malcolm. They didn't look at the roster and say, got to keep him. There was some reporting that they wanted to, have some vets on the roster next year and the sort of the path of the Rockets with young players and then the veterans appealed. But there's no way they looked at the roster and said, that's right, MB forever. He's part of the plan. So I think where the Blazers are is that they're pretty far away from being competitive. I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is the worst team in the Western Conference next year. And I, in some ways, proudly the worst team in the Western Conference, right? Like they're building up. San Antonio is going to be better than them. Some teams going to get hurt and have all types of and be bad, but the Blazers are going to be, if not the worst, and I think again, safe bet, at the bottom of the West in a very talented West, as you just pointed out.
And it's strategic, right? It's strategically bottoming out because that's organizationally the path that they have chosen. And I want to just, as a quick aside, I want to give a lot of credit to the organizations that actually recognize that this is probably the best and fastest way to get back to some level of relevancy in the NBA landscape, because unfortunately, what you don't want as a fan, as somebody who covers a team or whatever, is you don't want to be stuck on that treadmill of mediocrity. And I think there were 2 teams that did this for so long better than anybody else, other 28 teams in the association. And that was, for a very long time, the Sacramento Kings and the Washington Wizards. They were like the pinnacle of the mediocrity treadmill in the NBA, where every year you could count on them to win anywhere from 35 to 45 games. They're going to be at the tail end of the playoffs with no real hope of like maybe they get an upset in the first round, maybe. And it's a tall order, if that. So you don't want to be in that spot. You want to be either at the top and you want to be contending, or you want to be at the bottom and earning those assets, right? Getting those top draft picks and be able to draft and develop that young talent to hopefully take that step forward and get back to a place of relevant basketball.
Yeah, and you live in America's 4th largest city, which has Houston has a track record of signing free agents, right? They're one of the few teams over the last 10 years that has signed high-level free agents. Fred VanVleet.
They're definitely, it's not LA and Miami and New York, but it's probably that second tier of geographically. There's some similarities between Houston and the nightlife in Houston and LA, and so star players kind of gravitate towards that a little bit. They like the city of Houston, but it doesn't have quite the pull that those tier 1 cities do, but it's definitely right at the top.
Yeah, and Portland doesn't have that at all. It doesn't have enough rich people stuff to do, and we got bad weather, worse taxes, and it's super white. It's not an appealing NBA city for a variety of reasons, and that is going to be true forever. The way that the Blazers will be attractive to free agents is proximity to a championship. When they have proximity to a championship, folks will be like, I love the rain. I love those beautiful silver skies. Let's go. So for a team like Portland, that's not going to be a factor in free agency. And again, free agency might be dead. Thank you, Adam Silver. But it will, the way they're going to get good is to be bad, right? They're going to several cracks at it. It can go too long. Everyone knows it can go too long, and you can get messy, and you could be the T-Wolves or the Kings. But I don't think they got a race to the middle. So getting value for Malcolm Brogdon, particularly vets, and then seeing what you have with the youngsters and trying to find that foundational piece matters. It really matters.
But is that enough value? And that's kind of the crux of the argument here is you highlighted, okay, would you take a 28th, pick in the first round or a 31st pick in the second round, whatever, or is jumping 7 to 3 enough in this draft? Is there a prospect that you think either fits the Blazers or that they should be intrigued by enough that you would think Malcolm Brogdon is a worthwhile price to pay to move up 4 spots and get that 3rd overall pick?
I don't, but I'm going to let you sell me on it in the 3rd segment.
Great. I love it. I am absolutely, I'm up for the task. I'm going to absolutely sell you on that. We got that coming up right around the corner here as we wrap up the show. But first, we got to tell you guys about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. Still chatting here with probably like a.
I need a cool nickname like pass first point guard. I want that. I want a nickname like that for my show.
Yeah, see, that's classic radio. You need a good sign off, which is mine is like, see ya. Bye. Okay, it's over. I'm leaving. And a nickname, right? Like it's what is it? So I have a small child. We have an 18-month-old, and she has some toys, and the toys are from they're from like Chuckle and Burn, and I would like that's the name of the brand, and I was like, Chuckle and Burn sounds like a midday radio duo.
That absolutely sounds like a radio duel. Oh my god!
It's Mike Chuckle Richmond with Jackson Burn Gatlin, and
there you go.
Back to Locked On Blazers and Locked On Rockets. It's Chuckle and Burn, baby.
Oh my goodness! So yeah. It carries that weight. I mean, you know what? I'm gonna have to do some research and look into this, Mike, because I'm gonna need to come up with my own little like radio nickname, sign off, tag, whatever. But let's stop derailing the show here. Let's get back into it. So it's my job here to still sell you on why this trade works. Okay, so. Again, this is where I do need a little bit of your insight, your expertise, is because it is such a wide range of prospects after Alex Sarr in this draft. And I find myself, going over this with Rockets fans right now and discussing Rockets big boards and their draft targets if they should keep that third overall pick. It kind of feels like there's just not like that star upside swing at number 3. There's just not a player there, right? If you could entertain a discussion at getting the number 1 overall pick from Atlanta and maybe drafting Alex Sarr, he's probably like the biggest like upside swing at the top of the draft, high floor, high upside swing, whatever. But that's where I'm torn, is because I feel like the Blazers are in that position where they want to be taking as many big swings as possible. When you're at this early stage of the rebuild, that's where you need to be. Whereas I think this draft is chock full of players who, don't get me wrong, they're not going to be like bad players or anything, even though it's a weaker draft. I just think we're looking at more like long-term, like solid rotation players than any like upper tier, like star level talent coming out of this draft, with the exception of like a couple guys who do have some kind of, crazy high ceilings. Obviously, Alex Sarr being one of them. Stephon Castle's another one with, if the shot materializes, he's got some, very high ceiling potential there. But that's the kind of the issue here is there a target that the Blazers think internally, or that, through their own evaluations, would be worthy enough of jumping up those 4 spots?
Yeah. So it's like, I'm not a big Zachary Rees-Shea guy. Like I think he appeals to some Blazer fans more than me, but
he can't dribble.
I don't see it. Yeah. I don't see it. I'd like, he's big and he can defend and he can shoot, but if you can't create your own shot, you're a role player, and you're a role player forever. Like, and I think that's the concern. There's nothing wrong with being a role player. The challenge is that drafting someone 3rd overall.
Yeah. If you tell somebody, hey, we're going to use the 3rd overall pick and we're going to get a role player, you're like, what?
Yeah. I've been called French Rashard Lewis. It's like, Rashard Lewis was a good player for a long time in the pros, right? Like he's a good player on a team that made the finals with the Magic, but like, oh no, man! You don't want to draft Rashard Lewis 3rd overall.
Rashard Lewis, he was an All-Star one season, wasn't he? Or a couple seasons?
One-time All-Star.
There we go.
Under $115 million contract back when that was a giant contract. Like, had some good moments, right? But I'm not a Rees-Shea guy. I don't think the guards, like Nikola Topic, is an interesting one, right? Because he's big enough that maybe he could play some like wing creator stuff, but he's a non-shooter at this stage, and pairing another non-shooter with Scoot Henderson seems like a nightmare. So for you, are there names at 3 that you would say are that you are more appealing, that would be there at 3 that might not be there at 7, or would be worth it to say, hey, let's just be able to make that decision?
Yeah, so I think the couple names that come to mind is obviously, even though it feels like Atlanta is going the Alex Sarr route, I still don't think we can pencil in either of the two teams ahead of the Rockets, the Hawks or the Wizards, for it to guarantee like what either of them are going to do. Atlanta could trade that pick ultimately if they did really decide they want to run it back with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray for whatever reason they might want to do that. But right, being at pick number 3 gives you a chance at potentially getting one of Alex Sarr or Donovan Clingan, the two best bigs in this draft. Right. Two very different bigs too. Alex Sarr is kind of the new age, the modern NBA big, right? Versatile, kind of a 4 or 5 tweener, somewhat like that Jaren Jackson Jr. kind of build. Obviously needs to add a little bit more, grow into his NBA body. But very high ceiling player offensively. If the shot materializes at a consistent rate, then he'll be an elite pick and pop threat. He can play over the rim. So there's a lot to like about him. And then Donovan Clingan, a very different type of big, right? Your traditional kind of lumbering, legit 7-footer drop big, right? Just put him in drop coverage, completely change your defensive scheme. He's been trying to sell himself on the 3-point shot at the draft combine, really trying to gas himself up as somebody who's going to have that shot in his repertoire, maybe not right away, but at least down the line in his NBA career. And so I look at that and, you see shades of like a Brook Lopez type, right? If he can actually develop a 3-point shot and be the defensive, presence that he already is, then that's a really enticing prospect. And I think that for the Rockets, at least when you're looking at what they have on their roster already as far as young talent, they've got multiple guards. They've got a couple wings with Jabari and Tari, the guards, Jalen Amin and Cam Whitmore. They only have one exciting young big in Alperen Sengun, and both Alex Sarr and Donovan Clingan provide kind of a different look at the big man spot than what Alperen Sengun provides. So having that diversity in your lineup, being able to roll out, different lineups and different looks and playing through different guys, I think would benefit them greatly. So I think that's the downside is like, there's no way Sarr or Clingan are going to be there available at 7. So it depends on how greatly the Rockets value drafting a guy that kind of gives them a skill set or a player type, an archetype that they don't already have on this roster that also has, a high ceiling kind of outcome, versus being able to get a guy, further around 7, if we're talking about maybe Stephon Castle falling down there or Reed Shepherd being available down at pick number 7. I remember seeing the original mocks when the Rockets were at 9 with the Brooklyn Nets pick before the jump up happened. And it sucked because it felt like the handful of players that the Rockets should or would be interested in all were off the board by the time pick 9 rolled around, with the exception being Dalton Connect. He's the one that I am also heavily interested in from a Rockets perspective. And for most mocks, he was still on the board when pick 9 rolled around. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is just, I think that there's still value to be had if you do trade back. And I think that's the argument here is it worth it adding a Malcolm Brogdon type to the Rockets roster and still being able to add a young prospect, even though it's maybe not one of the guys at the very top of the draft, like a Clingan or a Sarr, versus having that control of pick number 3 and be able to pick whoever you want?
Yeah, I think it appeals. I understand the appeal to the Rockets a lot, right? It's like you add a veteran who can probably help, and you don't have that much value. Pitch me on your package, because I don't love it for the Blazers. It's like the opportunity to draft Stephon Castle and the opportunity to draft like Ron Holland or Matas Buzelis, like one of the wings with upside. I don't know that any of them are going to be stars. I like Holland. I like Buzelis. I'm not sold on them being stars. I kind of think Buzelis has the easiest path there, but he also has a lot of outcomes that have him being a bad basketball player. So what does a package look like? Because Malcolm Brogdon is making $22.5 million in the final year of his contract.
Yeah, so I think it kind of comes down to, obviously it would be a straight up swap between 3 and 7, so the picks get moved around. Brogdon comes to Houston, and then from that point, you're looking at just matching salary filler, I think, at that point. But you could also do it in a way that actually might give the Blazers, some trade fodder for a little bit further down the line, because you have a guy like Jock Landale, who is on an incredibly team-friendly contract. It's essentially, a non-guaranteed options all the way down. So, effectively an expiring every single season, $8 million a year, very team-friendly deal. And he kind of came online a little bit at the end of last season after struggling through most of the year. Yeah. So maybe he's a guy that actually has some intrinsic value that you could then flip in a separate trade to another team that maybe wants, a big man of their own. So not just exclusively salary filler that you're going to kick to the curb immediately. And then you fill in the rest of it with either, a guy like Jayshawn Tate or Jeff Green, more salary filler, but guys who do have some value that then you could maybe potentially turn around and flip. So we talked about Malcolm Brogdon maybe only being worth, right, a late first rounder, 28th pick in a draft. What would a Jock Landale, be worth, right? On that contract, very team friendly, probably not a late first, but maybe a couple seconds from the right team or something like that. Maybe, something to grease the wheels or just the ability to, aggregate salary in a deal further down the line, I think gives you some flexibility there. It's more so just, if the Blazers don't have any plans for Malcolm Brogdon at this point, then why not cash in on it and be able to get, again, your pick of whoever you think actually will come out of this draft and be successful rather than just waiting to see what remains at pick 7. I don't like this. This is like I'm lowering my or changing the offer here. I wouldn't do this trade, but I wouldn't be surprised, right? If Rafael tried to call up the Blazers and ask him for this deal, I wouldn't be surprised if the counter offer was, how about we give you 14 and Brogdon to move up to 3?
That's what I was going to say, is that it's because the Rockets don't have good salary match for a player that's with upside. I like Jeff Green for the Blazers because an off-ball vet for a really young team seems valuable. Love Uncle Jeff, always have. Incredible career highlight dunk package, one of the great all-time, he's crammed on you dunk packages in the history of the highlights of this league. Landale's fine, but whatever, right? He's a rotational big on a team that doesn't really have necessarily they're not. It's not yes, we got a rotational big. That deal, Jeff Green and Lando would save the Blazers about $5 million. So they get, they're a team that's right now, approaching the tax line or above the tax line, would have to jump down. Obviously 3 is going to make more money than 7. So that counts it. But if it was 3 and 14 for Green and Lando, would you walk?
Yeah, I don't think I would do it at that point because I feel like that's, dropping 11 spots from 3 to 14. I feel like some of the other prospects that, because even though we've discussed that there's not this massive drop off at the top of the draft, I do think there's probably about 10 to 10 to 12 names at the top that are going to go kind of in that lottery range. And you really start thinning out your odds of getting a player that you want if you're all the way down at pick 14. Now, there's a part of me, because I am very secretly a big Kel'el Ware fan. If the Rockets did drop down to 14, then they could just draft Kel'el Ware, who has a lot of the same, upside and measurables and gifts that I think an Alex Sarr type also has, but he's also been comped to Christian Wood, and there's questions about his motor and his effort and all that. So do you really want to risk it and go for that guy? I don't know. It's tough, but I wouldn't do 14 at that point. There have been, looking at the way the lottery is set up this year, right? Rockets have the 3rd overall pick. I've been eyeing different teams. So Blazers at 7, possibly the Bulls at pick 11, different teams to trade back and trade down for if there is value to be had coming back the other way. It's just tougher in a weaker draft where there's not those clear-cut star upside prospects at the top. If this was a couple years ago and we're talking about the big 3 at the top of the draft, right? Jabari Smith Jr., Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren. That was very clearly a draft where you had the top 3 prospects and they were all in their own tier by themselves. And then there was that drop off into that following tier. And so that would have been a year where if you got the 3rd overall pick, which the Rockets did, they were okay, thank God you made the cutoff, right? This year, not so much. It doesn't matter.
What about just sweeten this deal? The Rockets have a plethora of 2026 second rounders. Could I interest you in sprinkling in a couple future seconds to make this deal a little bit better?
I could maybe see them going as far as including I see. I don't know. That's the tough part is how much is Malcolm Brogdon worth? And I just feel like at that point, you might be overpaying for a guy who's not even going to be a consistent part of your your best 9-man rotation. He's not, I don't want to say he's injury insurance in this trade. He'd basically, for the Rockets, he'd be fulfilling the Aaron Holiday role from this past season, which Aaron Holiday became kind of a big part of the team.
He played a lot at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah. But by necessity, because Amin Thompson went down due to injury so early on, he stepped in and he filled a role, and his shooting was pivotal for a team that had no shooting. So obviously internal growth, you hope the Rockets become a better shooting team over the offseason, working with assistant coach Ben Sullivan and just getting all the guys up to speed on that end. But I think it's hard to sell and say, okay, we're going to add even more assets, or we're going to add this and do this for a guy that's not even going to be a consistent part of the rotation. He's more just that extra piece, the cherry on top, if you will, to add some depth to the lineup, because the Rockets only had 2 guys that could realistically handle the basketball and initiate offense last year, and that was Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green. there was a stretch where Fred VanVleet went out and it looked really, really bad because the Rockets didn't have any other primary ball handlers, guys that they could trust to initiate offense and get things going. And Malcolm Brogdon is that guy. He's got the history with Ime Udoka. He knows what he would want. And I think he's very capable of fulfilling that role, even if it's just, on a, 4 or 5 game basis. If somebody misses some time, whatever, it doesn't have to be a consistent thing. So I think it's hard to start adding on even more assets for that. So maybe a deal, maybe we can't make a deal, Mike, if you're going to be this difficult to negotiate with.
Well, I'm
curious what your Blazers fans think about this. I'm curious if they think it's a slam dunk. They're like, yeah, tell Brogdon to kick rocks, get him out of here.
My experience with most of my listeners is that they think that I undervalue their assets, and that I'm like, yeah, I don't know how much value Brogdon has. And they're like, idiot, he could be traded for multiple firsts. And I am an idiot, but not usually in this manner, right? Like like for me, I think the holding point is that I don't think there is enough value in jumping from 7 to 3 to make it worth it. If and this might be eyes of the beholder, right? If someone really loves Ron Holland, really loves Steph Castle, and says, listen, there's no way they drop to 7, right? Like there's no way you're going to get them at 7. Then I think that changes it, right? If you think Steph Castle and they finally got his measurements right, and he's 6'5.5" in shoes or without shoes on. So he didn't shrink 2 inches over a year, which would have been really bad for his draft stock. He actually grew a little bit. So like, if you think, okay, that's a top 5 pick, right? And he won't be there at 7. So we have to do it. I think that would be the thing for me, but I don't really I think standing pat at 7 in this particular draft, there's just not enough opportunity. The opportunity cost isn't high enough that like moving up to 3 would be worth it. But I would say this, because I don't think Malcolm Brogdon has a lot of standalone value coming up, like his availability, point guard.
He's also going into the final year of his contract. So like right. How much value does, the other thing, he also has some intrinsic value is just an expiring deal too. So there's that, right? $22.5 million could be attractive to a team that wants some salary cap relief, whatever. So you might be able to recoup value in a different way for him. Maybe somebody's not interested in Malcolm Brogdon, the player, but they're interested in Malcolm Brogdon, the salary, the tax savings.
$22.5 million. Yeah, exactly. There you go. The $22.5 million coming off the books. So I would say like, this is one of those things where valuable to gauge the market. Okay, this is a team that could use Malcolm Brogdon. Here's what they would offer, and then say, "We'll call you back. We'll call you back.
We'll call you back if we don't find anything else."
yeah. We'll call when we're very desperate in a couple of weeks. We'll call you back because that's how I feel. Like if you had convinced me, if really sold me on Donovan Clingan, who I've compared favorably to Steven Adams, like you're drafting Steven Adams at 3. Okay, it is. I think I'd be there, but I'm not there yet. So I think this is one of those where you see the value, you see the market. I think this is a reasonable proposal from the Rockets, but for now, I don't think we come to a deal. Maybe we'll come back and say we need 2 2026 second round picks, and that'll be the sticking point. Did we do it? Did we just make an episode, Jackson? Do you think we nailed it?
I think we did make an episode. I don't know if we nailed it. I did my best to try and sell you on this, and clearly my negotiating skills need some work here. Hopefully, behind the scenes, Rafael Stone's a little bit more adept at his negotiating tactics than I am. But we do want to hear from you guys. If you're listening, if you're watching the show on YouTube, give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments on Locked On Blazers, on Locked On Rockets. How would you feel about this trade? Is it a slam dunk? Do you think it makes a lot of sense? Let us know there. If you think it's a stupid trade, let us know there. Maybe in some not so unkind words.
Be nice, please.
Yeah.
We're fragile people. We do there's 250 episodes a year. Sometimes you don't complete a trade by the end of the show.
Oh man. But yeah, let us know how you feel about this trade. And Mike, I guess let everybody know where they can track you down at from the Rocket side of things.
Okay, I'm on Locked On Blazers 5 days a week, and it's also on YouTube, free and available on all platforms. I don't really have a social media presence, but if you want to find me there, at Mike G. Rich on Twitter. And for my listeners, Jackson, where can they find you?
Yeah, same thing here. I have toned down the Twitter usage in recent weeks and months, but you could track me down over at Locked On Rockets. We're there 5 days a week, as well as Locked On NBA Mondays. That's where I do all of my damage for the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got you covered, your team every day.
Come back, listen to shows next week, 5 of them wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. We appreciate you listening, and we will talk to you soon.